Hello there, and welcome to this Ostheer build order series I will be doing. My name is Alpern, and let's jump straight into it. This build order analysis is mainly focused around 1v1s, as in team games there are way too many variables to really discuss anything in a comprehensible manner. We are starting with Ostheer today since it's very straightforward, but we'll cover the other factions at a later time, so make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss out. In 1v1s for Ostheer, the clear majority of the games are started off with the queuing up the HMG, and then you put your pioneers into constructing the tier 1, and then you follow it up by building 3 grenadiers. This is a very solid opening for Ostheer, and therefore it sees a lot of play. It has a dangerous early game presence, as well as a strong scaling for the late game. Other builds are generally a bit more focused around commander gimmicks, such as Assault Grenadiers or Osttruppen. Though those are more rare, they require a very different playstyle. The HMG into 3 Grenadiers is in comparison quite well rounded, and you can play it both offensively and defensively. Following this, there are usually some possible change-ups depending on the course of the game itself. Most commonly, however, we see Battle Phase 1 followed up by taking the structure into a 2-2. Important here is to keep track of your pioneer during this phase while teching so that you can actually begin building the structure as soon as possible. A good 2-2 timing can be very crucial to a quick win if timed properly. Sometimes you do see a 4th Gren being queued up before Battle Phase 1, and this is by some considered a safer route, as if you're struggling for map control in the beginning of the match, you sometimes have a lot of manpower idle in the bank waiting for that 2-2. However, this very often results in a delay of the 2-2, which I think is a wasted opportunity. Worth noting, however, if you do notice floating a lot of manpower, there is a solid option of queuing that 4th Gren before grabbing the light vehicle. After the 2-2, the general is a 4th Gren queued anyway, hence why you sometimes see these two change place in the priority list. A very common contender is, however, to get the pack first, delaying that 4th Gren even further. I like mixing between both of these options between my games, as it makes you as a player a bit more unpredictable. Some might think delaying the pack until after the 4th Gren is a risky maneuver. However, you have 4 Grens with the longest snare in the game, as well as a 2-2. You don't really have to worry about light vehicles. And if you include something like the 50% pack build time bulletin, you shouldn't be worried at all, as long as you don't overextend. This 4th Gren is of course also replaceable by the Jaeger Infantry squad. Now the Jaeger Infantry squad is always going to be a better grenadier, but it still works perfect as a replacement if you lose an early Gren. Unfortunately, P-Grens don't see the same role. P-Grens suffer very much from bleeding by focus fire, and as a 4-man infantry unit without snares, it has very little upsides compared to getting a grenadier, which is usually more efficient. Thus, P-Grens are extremely rare to find in matches. Honorable mentions here are of course the Sniper and the Mortar, as they take place instead of the 4th Grenadier. These two units are not super common, and they are a bit more dependent on player preference, the map and adaptation versus your opponent than they are a part of any build order. A common follow-ups to this build is generally going to be a 2nd machine gun and a 2nd pioneer. Sometimes, if the game is going very poorly, a 2nd pack can be useful to keep the early enemy mediums at bay, and a 2nd pack is also your solution if you see some super aggressive early light vehicle builds, such as Stuarts into Greyhounds or double T-70. Sometimes, if the game goes very well, one or possibly even both of these units can be skipped for a super early Ostwind or Panzer IV. Most commonly than not though, you will simply tech for the Panzer IV after getting either of these units, perhaps both. Generally in the late game you are aiming to have a build of double Pioneer with 4 Grenadiers, 2 machine guns and 2 packs. Vehicles here can be really anything, but usually you do see these Panzer IVs as they have very fast timing and they do really well versus most allied armor. It's also really useful to keep 2-2 alive, because it can provide vision to your very support weapon heavy force. The priority to spend your munitions are always going to be tellers, camo for the MG42, camo and G43 for Grens, then Pintle upgrade for vehicles. Sweepers are usually the most prioritized upgrade versus Soviets, but a flamethrower can be equipped versus factions such as USF. Be aware, however, of the M20 and rifleman mines. The healing bunker should always be prioritized once you're taking heavy damage, and can be constructed sometimes as early as immediately after the 2-2. As with any faction, I would always recommend to be floating at least 50 to 60 munitions at all times to make sure that you can punish reckless vehicle behavior with snares or to get sneaky mines down. Now that's it for this Ostheer build order guide, but I will get to making this type of content for the other factions as well. I do plan to make a lot of this type of content for Company Heroes 3. So, you know, these guides are simply practice for me in the coming months before the launch. Cheers!